What happens when the divine lose their grip on mercy? When gods go mad, Tyranny and Bloodshed in Sacred Stories explores the darker side of mythology and religion, where once revered deities turn cruel, unleashing wrath, madness, and war. From ancient scriptures to forgotten legends, we'll uncover the chilling moments when gods abandon justice for vengeance, demanding loyalty through fear and blood. These tales aren't just myths, they reveal how power, unchecked even in the heavens, can lead to chaos. Join us as we peel When Gods Go Mad, Tyranny and Bloodshed in Sacred Stories. Throughout the span of human civilization, gods have been venerated as moral compasses, divine creators, and cosmic judges. Yet, in the sacred texts and mythologies of various cultures, there are moments when these same gods descend into madness, enact tyranny, and spill rivers of blood. These depictions challenge the notion of divinity as inherently good and reveal a darker, more primal side of spiritual belief, one that mirrors the chaos, cruelty, and lust for power that humanity itself often displays. This essay explores the disturbing yet fascinating phenomenon of divine madness in sacred stories, instances where gods go mad, wage war, enact vengeance, or impose tyrannical rule. We will examine examples from multiple traditions: the Hebrew Bible, Greek mythology, Hindu epics, Mesopotamian legends, and other cultural mythos. By analyzing these stories, we can better understand how ancient peoples viewed divine justice, the thin line between godhood and monstrosity, and the psychological and societal functions these stories served. Divine madness and moral dissonance. Sacred stories often function as moral frameworks, shaping a society's values and ethics. However, what happens when the gods at the center of these frameworks behave in morally ambiguous or outright tyrannical ways? In the book of Genesis, Yahweh's destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, Genesis 19, and the Great Flood, Genesis 6-9, reveal a God who reacts to human sin not with rehabilitation, but with annihilation. The deluge that wipes out humanity, save for Noah and his family, represents a divine purge, a cosmic reset triggered by divine wrath. Critics and theologians alike have questioned the ethics of such a reaction. Why must an all-powerful, all-knowing deity destroy what he created? Similarly, in the book of Job, we see a wager between Yahweh and Satan that results in Job's immense suffering. God's willingness to allow a righteous man to suffer simply to test his faith introduces a chilling idea. Divine will may be arbitrary, even cruel. The silence God maintains in the face of Job's suffering has been interpreted not just as a test of faith, but as a sign of divine madness or indifference. These instances reflect a moral dissonance. The God who commands, "Thou shalt not kill," is the same God who sanctions genocide, e.g., the destruction of the Canaanites in the book of Joshua. This contradiction suggests that divine madness in sacred stories may function as a mirror, reflecting humanity's own struggle with justice, power, and violence. 2. The Greek gods, divine caprice, and human tragedy. In Greek mythology, the gods are not moral paragons, but capricious immortals who wield power according to personal whims. Zeus, king of the gods, frequently rapes mortal women, incites wars, and punishes both mortals and other gods for minor offenses. His sense of justice is erratic, one moment generous, the next brutally punitive. The Trojan War, a central tale in Greek myth, is set in motion by a divine beauty contest. Eris, the goddess of discord, throws a golden apple marked to the fairest into a wedding feast. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite each claim it. Paris, a mortal prince, is asked to judge and chooses Aphrodite, who promises him Helen, the most beautiful woman alive, despite her being married to Menelaus, a Spartan king. The resulting abduction of Helen triggers a war that lasts a decade and claims countless lives. This war, orchestrated by gods, reveals the devastating consequences of divine vanity. Gods meddle in the battlefield, Apollo sends plagues, Athena manipulates warriors, and Zeus flips allegiances, treating human lives like game pieces. In the Iliad, Achilles' rage and eventual murder spree are fueled by divine intervention, but the carnage is born of a godlike fury that seems indistinguishable from madness. The Greeks understood that gods were not necessarily good. Rather, they were powerful and dangerous. Their stories reveal that proximity to divinity often leads not to enlightenment, but to destruction. 3 bloodthirsty deities in Hindu epics. In the Mahabharata and Ramayana, Hindu epics revered as sacred scripture, gods are deeply involved in human affairs and often exhibit terrifying aspects. Hindu theology accepts a duality in divine nature. The same God can be both a creator and a destroyer, a protector and an annihilator. Kali, the goddess of time and destruction, is a prime example. She is often depicted dancing in a frenzy on the corpses of demons, her tongue lolling and her eyes wild with bloodlust. In one myth, after slaying the demon Raktabija, whose blood spawns new demons with each drop, Kali drinks his blood to prevent his regeneration and continues her dance of death, unable to stop. The gods plead with Shiva, her consort, to intervene. He lies in her path, and when she steps on him, she realizes what she's done and calms. Here, the madness is not malevolent, but unrestrained cosmic power. Kali represents a form of divine frenzy that is both fearsome and holy, destruction as a necessary counterpart to creation. Similarly, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna reveals his Vishvarupa, a terrifying universal form, to the warrior Arjuna. In this form, Krishna is not the benevolent God of love and compassion, but a vast, many-mouthed being devouring all of creation. Arjuna is so overwhelmed he collapses in fear. Krishna tells him, "I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." This is not madness in the human sense, but a kind of transcendent, inhuman logic, an acceptance that destruction is part of divine order. 4. Mesopotamian mayhem in Enlil, Ishtar, and Marduk. Ancient Mesopotamian mythology features gods who rule with fear, often descending into rage or madness. The Epic of Gilgamesh introduces gods who punish humans with plagues, floods, and monsters for minor slights or moral failures. In one story, the god Enlil becomes irritated by human noise and decides to flood the world, eerily prefiguring the biblical flood. This divine overreaction portrays the gods not as wise rulers, but as cosmic tyrants whose tempers are deadly. Ishtar, goddess of love and war, falls into a murderous frenzy when spurned by Gilgamesh. After he rejects her advances, she unleashes the bull of heaven on his city, resulting in massive devastation. Ishtar's behavior blends romantic obsession with divine entitlement, and her wrath is portrayed as impulsive and catastrophic. In the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, the god Marduk defeats the primordial goddess Tiamat, dismembers her body, and uses it to create the world. This act of divine violence becomes the foundation of cosmic order, a theme that echoes in other mythologies. The world is born from divine bloodshed, and chaos is quelled only through tyrannical power. Psychological and social dimensions of divine tyranny. Why do so many cultures depict their gods as mad, violent, or tyrannical? One reason is psychological. These stories reflect the human attempt to understand the arbitrary nature of suffering, war, and death. When disasters strike, plagues, famines, genocides, it is natural for ancient peoples to ask, why? The answer often became, the gods are angry. Divine madness becomes a theological explanation for chaos. These stories don't just justify suffering, they ritualize it. From a social standpoint, stories of tyrannical gods often mirror the political realities of the societies that produce them. Kings and emperors were often seen as divine or semi-divine. Their power was absolute. Sacred stories of divine madness may serve as cautionary tales about earthly power, disguised critiques of despotic rulers. Moreover, these tales can offer catharsis. The image of a god who rages and then restores order, like Kali calming after stepping on Shiva, or Yahweh offering a rainbow after the flood, mirrors the cycles of destruction and renewal that define human history. 6. Contemporary reflections and reinterpretations. Modern readers often struggle with these ancient depictions. How can we reconcile the concept of an all-loving God with the divine wrath depicted in so many sacred texts? Some interpret these moments as metaphorical. The madness of gods represents inner spiritual turmoil, societal collapse, or the darkness of the human psyche. Others take a more critical view, arguing that these stories reveal the dangers of blind faith. When sacred authority justifies violence, it becomes a tool of oppression. From the Crusades to modern religious extremism, divine tyranny has often been echoed in human action. Still, these stories endure because they touch something primal, the recognition that power, divine or otherwise, is double-edged. Gods who go mad reflect the terrible beauty of a world governed by forces beyond our control. Divinity and the abyss. When gods go mad is not just a description of mythic stories. It is a revelation of how humanity has always grappled with the limits of justice, the chaos of existence, and the terrifying nature of power. Sacred stories that portray tyrannical or bloodthirsty gods are not blasphemies. They are sacred confessions, acknowledgments of a universe where divinity is not always benevolent, and where creation is often born from destruction. These stories are timeless because they ask timeless questions. Is power inherently corrupting, even for gods? Can madness serve a divine purpose? And if the gods can go mad, what hope is there for humanity? Perhaps the answer lies not in denying the madness of the gods, but in understanding it as a reflection of ourselves, as a warning, and as a mystery that lies at the heart of all sacred belief. The Greek gods, divine caprice, and human tragedy. In the myths of ancient Greece, the gods do not embody perfect justice or unconditional benevolence. Unlike the singular, omnipotent deity of monotheistic religions, the Greek gods are flawed, emotional, impulsive, and often driven by vanity, lust, or revenge. They govern with immense power, but little moral consistency. This divine caprice, the unpredictable and often arbitrary behavior of the gods, plays a central role in Greek mythology, shaping a world where mortals are frequently the victims of forces beyond their control. This essay explores how the divine caprice of the Greek gods manifests in myths, and what that reveals about the ancient Greek worldview. We'll delve into stories from Homer, Hesiod, and various playwrights and philosophers, exploring how the Greeks used their gods not as moral guides but as metaphors for power, chaos, and fate. Their actions not only entertain but illuminate a tragic vision of life, one in which suffering is often senseless, virtue unrewarded, and justice a matter of divine mood. The nature of the Greek gods. Unlike later religious systems that exalt a single, omnibenevolent deity, the Greeks imagined a pantheon of gods who were deeply human in their motivations. Zeus, the king of the gods, is simultaneously the upholder of law and a serial philanderer. Hera, the goddess of marriage, is also wrathful and vengeful, punishing innocent mortals like Heracles or Semele out of spite. Aphrodite stirs uncontrollable lust in mortals, while Ares thrives on senseless bloodshed. Even wise Athena can act ruthlessly, as when she blinds the seer Tiresias simply for glimpsing her bathing. This humanization of the gods is intentional. The Greeks did not necessarily want gods to serve as perfect models of behavior. Instead, they accepted the gods as powerful but flawed, beings whose personalities reflected the spectrum of human emotions, only amplified by immortality and divine force. This worldview suggests a radical difference from later theistic conceptions of divine justice. The Greek gods are not bound by an overarching moral code. They are bound only by Moira, fate, and sometimes by the Themis, divine order, which even Zeus cannot fully escape. Consequently, their capriciousness is not seen as blasphemous but as a fundamental truth of existence. 2. The Trojan War, gods as war profiteers. Nowhere is divine caprice more dramatically illustrated than in the Trojan War, as told in Homer's Iliad. The war begins not because of a crime against morality or law, but because of a divine beauty contest. Eris, goddess of discord, throws a golden apple marked to the fairest into a wedding banquet of the gods. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite each claim the prize. Paris, a mortal prince of Troy, is asked to judge. Each goddess offers him a bribe. Hera offers power, Athena offers wisdom and victory in war, and Aphrodite offers him the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen of Sparta. Paris chooses Aphrodite. The problem? Helen is already married to King Menelaus. Her abduction or seduction, depending on the version, sparks a 10-year war that kills thousands. Thus, one of the most significant events in Greek mythology begins not from any grand principle, but from petty divine vanity and bribery. Throughout the war, the gods take sides not based on justice or righteousness, but on personal favoritism. Athena and Hera support the Greeks because they were snubbed by Paris. Aphrodite and Apollo side with the Trojans. Zeus occasionally intervenes but often remains passive, arbitrating divine squabbles with indifference to mortal suffering. In the Iliad, mortals like Hector and Achilles are aware of this divine influence, and their actions often reflect a fatalistic understanding of divine whim. Achilles' rage, central to the epic, is not merely a personal flaw, but a manifestation of a godlike force that consumes and destroys. When he slaughters Hector and desecrates his body, it is not because justice demands it, but because grief and wrath have overtaken him, echoing the same madness that afflicts the gods themselves. 3. Tragic mortality, hubris, and punishment. The Greek gods are hypersensitive to hubris, excessive pride or defiance toward them, and they punish it mercilessly. But their standards are unpredictable and often cruel. This dynamic reflects a recurring theme in Greek tragedy. Human suffering is frequently a result not of evil deeds, but of offending the delicate egos of gods. Consider the myth of Niobe, queen of Thebes. Proud of her many children, she mocks the goddess Leto, who has only two, Apollo and Artemis. In response, Apollo and Artemis slaughter all of Niobe's children, except in some versions 1 or 2, and Niobe flees to Mount Sipylus, where she turns to stone, eternally weeping. Her crime? Boasting of her children. Similarly, Arachne, a mortal woman gifted in weaving, claims she is a better weaver than Athena. After a contest in which Arachne's tapestry is flawless, even more beautiful than Athena's, the goddess destroys it, beats Arachne, and turns her into a spider. The story is not a lesson in humility, but a warning. The gods are intolerant of comparison, even when deserved. Even heroes like Prometheus, who gives fire to humanity, suffer eternally for their defiance. Zeus punishes Prometheus by chaining him to a rock, where an eagle eats his liver daily. His crime was compassion for mortals, defying a god's desire to keep them weak. These myths suggest that divine caprice is not just unpredictable, but vindictive. Mortals must walk a fine line. Too proud, and they're destroyed. Too successful, and they threaten divine supremacy. 4. Divine love, destruction by affection. In many myths, divine love is as dangerous as divine wrath. When gods fall in love with mortals, the result is rarely a happy ending. Semele, mother of Dionysus, is burned to death after Zeus reveals his true divine form to her, a request she was manipulated into making by a jealous Hera. Io, a priestess of Hera, is transformed into a cow and tormented across the earth after Zeus falls in love with her. Callisto, a follower of Artemis, is seduced or raped by Zeus, transformed into a bear, and nearly killed by her own son. These stories suggest that mortal women are especially vulnerable to divine attention. The gods' affections are not gifts but weapons. Divine relationships are invasions, uninvited, overpowering, and often ruinous. Here, love becomes another form of divine caprice, a force that, though clothed in beauty or desire, leads to tragedy. Justice, or the lack thereof. The concept of justice, in Greek thought is fluid. While some gods are associated with justice, such as Zeus as the enforcer of oaths or Themis as the goddess of divine law, there is no consistent standard. Justice in myth is often situational, influenced by personal vendettas and emotional states. For example, Orestes, in Aeschylus' Oresteia, kills his mother Clytemnestra to avenge his father Agamemnon, who was murdered by her. Yet matricide is also a crime. The gods are divided. Apollo supports Orestes. The Furies demand his punishment. Only the intervention of Athena in a divine court resolves the matter, and even then, the resolution is more political than moral. Athena appeases the Furies to prevent cosmic disorder, not because Orestes is unambiguously right. In these myths, justice is not absolute but negotiated, often reflecting the social and political values of the time rather than universal morality. The gods' behavior reinforces this ambiguity. They are not models of fairness but enforcers of divine hierarchy. Justice, in their hands, becomes a matter of power dynamics rather than ethical clarity. 6. Theatrical tragedy and the divine. The Greek tragedians, Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, often used mythological themes to critique or question the gods. While the public was religious, theater offered a space to explore uncomfortable truths about divine behavior. In Hippolytus by Euripides, the goddess Aphrodite causes the destruction of a chaste and pious man simply because he refuses to worship her. His stepmother Phaedra, driven mad by Aphrodite's will, falls in love with him and ultimately causes his death. In the Bacchae, Dionysus drives the women of Thebes into a frenzied state and has Pentheus, the skeptical king, torn apart by his own mother. Both plays depict gods who demand worship not through enlightenment but through terror. Euripides in particular seemed troubled by the gods' behavior. His plays often leave the audience questioning whether the gods deserve reverence at all. And yet, despite their cruelty, the gods win. Mortals may protest, but they are powerless. Tragedy, then, becomes not a resolution of justice, but an acknowledgement of human vulnerability. 7. Interpreting the madness of the gods. The Greeks did not view these divine stories as literal history or strictly religious doctrine. Rather, myths were symbolic frameworks that explained the mysteries and sufferings of life. The gods were personifications of nature, fate, and the human psyche. Their irrationality reflected the unpredictable world, earthquakes, storms, disease, and war that the Greeks inhabited. Zeus' infidelities might reflect the chaos of natural forces, Poseidon's wrath, the danger of the sea, Artemis' severity, the cruelty of the wild. To tell stories of divine caprice was to confront, and somewhat domesticate, the randomness of existence. Modern scholars such as Walter Burkert and Jean-Pierre Vernon have emphasized that Greek religion was not about piety in the modern sense, but about ritual, acknowledgement, and survival. To honor the gods was to secure protection from their wrath, not because they were always just, but because they were powerful. A world without guarantees. In Greek mythology, the gods are not moral anchors but cosmic forces, agents of beauty, chaos, and destruction. Their caprice shapes a universe in which virtue does not always triumph, and evil is not always punished. Mortals are caught in a web of divine politics, where the line between favor and ruin is thin and shifting. This tragic worldview is not nihilistic, but profoundly human. It reflects a culture that understood the fragility of life, the limitations of reason, and the unpredictability of the world. By accepting that even the gods can be petty, vengeful, and mad, the Greeks acknowledged a deeper truth: that life offers no guarantees, only the struggle for meaning amid chaos. In a sense, the madness of the gods is a mirror. It reflects the human condition in all its contradictions, noble and base, rational and wild. Through these stories, the Greeks confronted the divine not to find certainty, but to wrestle with its absence. The line between divinity and tyranny is thinner than we think. When Gods Go Mad has shown us how sacred stories can mirror the darkest parts of human nature: rage, power, and unchecked control. These aren't just ancient tales, they're warnings echoing through time. If the gods can fall to madness, what does that say about those who follow them? Thanks for watching. If you found this eye-opening, like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. What story shocked you most? And remember, sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the ones we worship. Until next time, question the divine.